All right, well, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu wa sallam wa baraka ala Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. No, it's good. I think that's actually good. And then it'll pick up from the speakers. So we should be good, inshallah. طيب يا اخوان واختي. So tonight we were going to do, or my intention was to do something fairly light. And the last three sessions that I had with you all were what we would say, the Arabi would say, decimate. They were kind of intense, and the topic was heavy, and it was important and pertinent because we're about to go into Ramadan and we need to kind of remind ourselves of the nuts and bolts of fasting, etc. But tonight I wanted to do something that was more geared toward our spiritual development, something that will help us have the right mindset in terms of something that we all face in life, and something which was, again, like I said, fairly light. Give us not talk too much, and give us an opportunity before the iftar if we wanted to read some more Quran, if we wanted to make dhikr, if we wanted to make dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala leading up to iftar, we would have an opportunity to do that. In the meanwhile, while we are in the process of having the lesson, I have an iPad and I have a physical pad here with a table that I'd like you all to fill out if you would be so kind. So one of the brothers would take one of them, one would take the other. So basically what you see on this tablet, and we'll be signing people up tonight hopefully and for the next few nights, is what we would like to do is we would like to improve the way that we communicate in the masjid, particularly regarding programming. Right now, typically, Salat al-Jum'ah is how we kind of get the messaging out, and we could communicate more effectively if we did something happen to it, or no. So at any rate, as I said, we can communicate a lot more effectively if we had a way to reach our members. So for example, if we could reach them by email, we could do two things. One, we could announce that there's a program, but what we can also do is we can survey regarding the program. So after a program is done, was the program beneficial? Should we do it again? What would you like to see us do next? We can also poll and survey and ask about when programming should be scheduled so it suits the majority of our members. These are things that we can do if we have our members' emails. If we have your phone number, we can also couple that with a texting app that will allow us, for example, let's say a program is canceled suddenly and people are on their way. If we send your email, a lot of people are not checking email while they're driving, but most people within 3 minutes of receiving a text have checked it. So we want to just improve the way we communicate more effectively, and we'll be able to do that if we have the email list. It won't be used for anything other than what I just mentioned. And so again, we're encouraging brothers and sisters to sign up over the next few days. I'll actually hopefully be out after the class with a table signing people up. But right now during the class, I figured we could pass around the items that we have, tablet and actual written options for that purpose. Like that said, let's get right into what we want to talk about. Those of you who attended the 3-day or the 3 installments of the explanation or the commentary on Kitab al-Siyam from Bulugh al-Maram, if you remember when we opened the series and the installments, we spoke about Ibn Hajar al-Asqalani, who was the compiler of the work Bulugh al-Maram. And we mentioned how his life began with adversity, very serious adversity which could have altered the trajectory of his life tremendously. In his infancy, he lost his mother. And by the time he was 4 years old, he'd also lost his father. And so he was an orphan twice before he was even 5 years old. And you would think that you would not be surprised if he turned out to be just a regular person, or turned out to be someone who was not productive in life at all. And here he turns out to be the Imaam of the Imams, the scholar of the scholars, the Sheikh al-Islam, the leading authority of Islam in his time, he turns out to be this and memorizes the Quran 5 years after losing his father at the age of 9 years old. And so one of the things that got me thinking about was the concept of adversity and dealing with adversity. Because the way that Ibn Hajar at such a young age dealt with adversity, responded to adversity, I found it very profound. And so I wanted to say a few words about facing adversity, facing hardships in this little short khatira or kalima. So the first thing I want to say about adversity and hardships is that it is unfortunately a part of life. And when the brothers are finished with it, if we could pass it back to the sisters kindly, that would be great. So as unfortunate as it is, the reality is that adversity and hardship is a part of life. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. Verily, indeed, we have created man in toil. We've created him in struggle. We've created him in a situation where his reality is he's going to constantly face adversity. And this is something that none of us need to be told. All of us can just reflect on the reality of life, reality of our own experience, and experience of people around us, and fully acknowledge that life is filled, it's rife with struggle. Everybody, at some point in life, is struggling with something. Some people are struggling in their domestic life. They're struggling at home. Could be husband and wife having differences that threaten the marriage, threaten their union. Could be parents struggling with their children, and the house is toxic. The relationship between parent and child is toxic. It could be a person struggling in his work, in his career. A person who is stuck in a dead-end job and he's miserable. Or a person who's unemployed, looking for work and having a hard time finding it. A person can face adversity in their financial affairs, financially struggling to make ends meet. A person struggling with their health, get over one illness and, fall ill to something else. Or have a chronic illness which causes them to have to repeatedly go to the doctor for treatment, etc. And on and on and on. Everyone, just about everyone in this room will say, yeah, I can bear witness to that, or I can attest to that, or I'm experiencing that, or I'm experiencing something akin to that. And this is what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He means when He says, لَقَدْ خَلَقْنَا الْإِنسَانَ فِي كَبَدٍ. We've created man in toil and struggle, created man facing adversity. As Al-Hasan al-Basri, he said, commenting on the ayah, he said, يُكَابِدْ مَضَائِقَ الدُّنْيَا وَشَدَائِدِ الْآخِرَةِ. He endures the difficulties of this life and the tribulations of the hereafter. And this statement of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, along with the tafsir of Al-Hasan, is further confirmed throughout the Quran in every ayah, every verse where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that the reality of life is that it is a test. So for example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, الَّذِي خَلَقَ الْمَوْتَ وَالْحَيَاةَ لِيَبْلُوكُمْ أَيُّكُمْ أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. أَحْسَنُ عَمَلًا. He is the one who created death and life to test you. Which of you is best in deeds? Which of you is going to do good deeds in spite of what? In spite of the tests. He says, أَحَسِبَ النَّاسُ أَن يُتْرَكُوا أَن يَقُولُوا آمَنَّا وَهُمْ لَا يُفْتَنُونَ. Do the people think that they'll be left alone saying we believe and they won't be tested? And he says, for example, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ بِشَيْءٍ مِنَ الْخَوْفِ وَالْجُوعِ وَنَقْصٍ مِنَ الْأَمْوَالِ وَالْأَنفُسِ وَالثَّمَرَاتِ وَبَشِّرْ الصَّابِرِينَ. He says, and we will certainly test you with something of the loss of wealth and life and fruits, material things. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ, right? And give glad tidings to those who are patient. And on and on and on from the ayat in the Quran which tell us that adversity is a reality of life. But if a Muslim just focuses on that, that can not only cause that Muslim to become hopeless, to despair, it can also cause that Muslim to fall into a deep sense of depression. My life is just going to be test after test after test. But what balances that and should keep us from falling into despair, falling into depression, is the fact that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala promises in the Quran that from His wisdom is that He will never test us with anything which is beyond our capacity. He never tests us to harm us. He always tests us to help us. As He says, لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. Allah does not place on a soul a burden greater than it can bear. He knows what we can tolerate. He knows what we can bear, and He only gives us what we can bear. And even if we see the test like this huge boulder that we're supposed to push up a hill, we see the test like that. Like, this is unsurmountable. I can't do it. It's not that we really can't do it. It's that we have underestimated ourselves. Because Allah knows us better than we know ourselves. And the fact that He put it on us is certain knowledge, or should give us certain knowledge that we can handle it, because He promised, and He never breaks His promise. He never lies. He never speaks falsely. لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا. I will never give you a test that you can't bear. Then, what this should do for us, once we balance out all this information about tests and trials, we balance it out with the knowledge that He won't test us with anything we can't take, that should lead us to rejoice min jihah, from one angle. From one angle we should rejoice, and from the other angle we should learn or be able to muster the strength to be patient from the other angle. As far as rejoicing, we should rejoice because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not give us more than we can handle. That He could have made, because He can do anything, He could have made the test even greater. Is that not so? He could have made it even greater than this. But He only made it as severe and as difficult as I can handle. And that's a mercy that should make me rejoice, because it could have been worse. So for example, let's say that a person, his company is going through layoffs. And everybody is on edge because they fear that their number will be called. And they'll be laid off and be out of work. They won't know how to take care of their household and pay their bills and manage their affairs without the salary, the revenue, the income from the job. So this person, he gets called in. And he's thinking to himself, oh no, this is the end. What am I going to do? How am I going to pay my rent? How am I going to feed my family? I got a baby on the way. He's thinking like this, right? So his boss calls him in. He thinks he's going to get laid off. But his boss calls him in and says, listen, you know, we're making these cuts and we're having to lay people off. It's a very unfortunate circumstance. We have no intention on laying you off. But we do need you to take a demotion, a slight cut in salary, but we're going to keep you on. That person at that moment has to look at that and say that Allah gave me the test I could handle, and it could have been worse, because he could have told me you're laid off, you're unemployed, as opposed to you're employed, but you're unfortunately demoted. You guys see you see that? And this is how we have to look at it, and this should make us min jihah, from one angle, it should make us rejoice. Like the second angle, we said it should make us be able to be patient. And when Allah tells us, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us that لَا يُكَلِّفُ اللَّهُ نَفْسًا إِلَّا وُسْعَهَا, Allah will not place upon a person a burden greater than what he can bear, that should help us muster the strength to be patient. Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us the test that we can bear. So when that situation comes, that hardship comes, what we do is we make the most of a less than desirable set of circumstances. We make the most of a less than desirable set of circumstances. As the saying goes, if life gives you lemons, you make lemonade. That's what the Muslim does. That's what the Muslim does, is that the Muslim, he hunkers down and says, okay, this is the situation. Let me make the best of a less than desirable situation. Where does that come from? Allah didn't give me this test to hurt me. He gave me this test to help me. I've got to figure out how to what? Turn something bad into something good. Life gives you lemon, you make lemonades. Like who did? Like Ibn Hajar did. Lost his mother in infancy. Lost his dad at 4 years old. Went and did what? Memorized the Quran. Became Shaykh al-Islam. Became a name which is going to be remembered until the end of time because of the mu'allafat, because of the books that he wrote, which are essential books for people to learn, to teach, and to study from. You can't study Islam without studying Fath al-Bari. Sharh Sahih Bukhari, the explanation of Sahih Bukhari. Who wrote that? Ibn Hajar. Orphaned, both parents, at 4 years old. Life gives you lemons, you make what? Lemonade. And so this is an example from the many examples we can give that just shows us we can do it, we can face these hardships. This is how we face these hardships. And this is the beauty of our deen. It gives us a solution for problems that everybody faces, but many people don't have solutions for it. As a result, they despair. They become depressed, and they harm others or they harm themselves. We're spared this because of the beauty of our religion and the beauty of its teachings. I want to close with a couple of tanbihat, a couple of important notes. So the first note is that we have this reality, as we said at the outset, the reality of tests and being tested, and life being a test, and us being created to toil and to struggle. So we have this reality. And unfortunately, what some people do is they use this reality as a justification to make other people's lives miserable. So they will basically intentionally, purposefully, willfully do harm. And harm comes in a number of forms. It could be physical, it could be emotional, it could be financial, it could be verbal. Or they don't, or at the very least, they don't make any effort not to do harm. And then when they're called on it, when they're taken to task for it, they'll justify it by saying, look, man, life is hardship. Life is toil and struggle. So if I hurt you financially, if I hurt you emotionally, if I made your life miserable in some way, that's just a part of what? The struggle, that's Allah's decree. Right? Abd'Llah. It's Allah's decree. The fact that this is a reality does not authorize us to make other people's lives miserable. Doesn't authorize us to test people. You guys see that? This is very, very important. Because some people think that it's actually their responsibility to test people, or even worse, to punish people. That basically somebody does a wrong. They do a wrong to you. In your mind, that wrong, that quote unquote they did, could be real or imagined. Could be actual or simply perceived. And you think, you know what? That person deserves to be punished in X way or Y way. For them to, pay back, or to basically be penalized and pay the penalty or the price for whatever wrong I perceive them to have done. All of this is unacceptable because our deen tells us who tests, people or Allah. And one of the reasons why Allah is the one who tests and the one who penalizes is because we are unable to be just. That's one reason. And two, we're unable to discern what is the most correct penalty and what is the most proper test. Allah says, لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها. Allah doesn't test a soul with anything beyond what it can bear. Do you know what I can bear? No. Do you know what I can bear?
No.
Do I know what you can bear?
No, sir.
That's why I can't test you. And some people, they test and they push and they apply pressure to people. They try to punish and penalize people and they push them too far. Person takes their life. Person attempts to take their life. Person leaves the deen because of somebody's what? Constantly applying pressure that they think the other person deserves, or they think it's just part of life. Get over it. Right? Life is test. Life is toil. Kebet. No, it's not for us to do that. That's for who? Allah. That's why the Prophet, he tells us to go out of our way to try to make other people's lives harder or easier? Easier. He says, yassiru wala tu'assiru. He says, make things easy for people, don't make them difficult. He also tells us to have a demeanor, a way of interacting with people, that even if they are going through something, it can do what? It can lighten their burden. It can lighten their load. He tells you to meet your brother with a frown. Meet your brother with a smile. How many times have you been having a bad day and somebody came and just smiled in your face and said Assalamu alaikum, and it was uplifting? Had it ever happened to you? It's happened to me. He told us, إِذَا كُنْتُمْ ثَلَاثًا فَلَا يَتَنَاجِي إِثْنَانِ دُونَ صَاحِبِهِمَا فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يُحْزِنُهُ. He said, if you're three people together, don't let two of you go off and start whispering. Because what will that do? It'll make the other person think you're talking about them, make them miserable. The Prophet is telling you, tiptoe around the delicate sensibilities of your brothers and sisters in Islam. You don't know what they're going through. Don't make it worse. That was the first 10b. Second 10b, and then we'll close with that, is that in addition to the fact that we're not supposed to make other people's lives miserable, we're also not supposed to do what? Make our own lives miserable. Which is another mistake when people think about this concept of life being test and toil and struggle. They think that if it ain't rough, as we say in slang, they say, if it ain't rough, it ain't right. Right? If it ain't rough, it ain't right. So, a person has a choice between two jobs. One job is shaq. It's very difficult, laborious. This is back-breaking work with very little wages. So the person's going to work really hard and still turn around to his family and not have enough to take care of their needs. Another job is less difficult, less taxing, less laborious. Pays well enough for him to take care of his family. He's not supposed to say, you know, I'm going to take the one which is backbreaking because life is supposed to be toil. Is he supposed to do that? No, that's not what our deen tells us to do. You don't make things difficult on yourself. You try to make it easier on yourself as best as you can within your capability, and you leave the rest to who? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that's why Aisha radiallahu anha, when she described the Prophet, she said, ما كان رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم خير بين أمرين إلا أخذ بأيسرهما ما لم يكن إثما. She said the Prophet was never given a choice between two things, except that he chose the easier of the two, provided that it wasn't a sin. It didn't involve sin. He took the easier. He wouldn't take the harder road. He wouldn't go the more difficult path. And he even told us, he said, احرص على ما ينفعك واستعن بالله ولا تعجز. He said, keenly pursue that which is going to benefit you. That which is in your best interest. واستعن بالله, seek Allah's help. ولا تعجز. And don't be like negligent and I'm just going to take it as it comes. No. احرص. This is what he's telling us. This is something beneficial for you. They got a desk job for you and you can make twice as much. There's nothing wrong with taking that. And so you have two things there. Somebody says, hey, you should take that job that pays less and struggle and experience, poverty. And no, that's not what our deen teaches us. It doesn't teach us that. That's not what the Prophet is teaching. That's not what the meaning of the fact that we're supposed, that life is kebet. Kebet from who? From Allah. Allah decides what struggles and trials and tribulations to expose us to subject us to. We don't make that decision. And so with that, as I said, I did want to leave some time for dhikr, for dua, for preparation for the thought, etc. So I'll stop here as far as speaking. Are there any questions or comments? Remember, the pad and the tablet are going around. I hope everybody gave their information. And inshallah ta'ala, if you could all help me by being word of mouth advertisers. Hopefully we'll be out between Maghrib and Isha after iftar with a table. If you could just say, hey, they're signing people up for the masjid announcements. Very important for us to communicate more effectively, and also to be able to poll you, survey you regarding what type of programming we should offer, how we should offer it, when we should offer it, etc. And that's why this sign up is so important. No questions, no comments, going once, going twice, gone. هذا وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.